Nicholas King was 32 years old, and 3 months ago, the woman he loved looked him in the eye and told him he wasn't good enough to marry her without protection. That protection? A prenuptial agreement so one-sided it would make a divorce lawyer weep. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Nicholas was sitting on a $100 million inheritance he'd kept secret for years. And he was about to find out exactly what his fiancée and her family really thought of him. It started on a cold November evening in 2024. Nicholas was working his usual shift as a high school chemistry teacher in Seattle, grading papers in his small apartment in the Greenwood neighborhood. His phone buzzed with a text from his fiancée. "Sharon Ashford, we need to talk. Come to my parents' house tomorrow at 7. Important." Nicholas felt his stomach tighten. They had been engaged for 6 months, and the wedding was scheduled for March. Sharon came from money. Her father owned a successful chain of luxury car dealerships across Washington and Oregon, and her mother sat on the boards of several nonprofits. Nicholas, on the other hand, made $58,000 a year, teaching teenagers about molecular structures. He drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and lived in a 600-square-foot apartment that smelled faintly of the Thai restaurant downstairs. He had always known the wealth gap bothered Sharon's parents, but Sharon herself had seemed different. She was a marketing director at a tech startup, making 6 figures, and she'd always told him that money didn't matter, that his passion for teaching and his kind heart were worth more than any bank account. Nicholas had believed her. The next evening, he drove to the Ashford estate in Medina, just outside Seattle. The house was a sprawling, modern mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. Nicholas had been there dozens of times, but it never stopped feeling intimidating. He parked his modest sedan next to Sharon's white BMW and her father's silver Mercedes S-Class. Sharon answered the door, but something was different. Her smile was tight, professional, like she was greeting a client instead of her fiancé. "Come in," she said. "Everyone's in the study." Everyone? Nicholas's heart sank. This wasn't just a casual conversation. He followed her through the marble foyer into the wood-paneled study, where Sharon's parents sat on a leather sofa. Her father, Richard Ashford, was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of confidence that came from never having heard the word no. Wore a cream-colored pantsuit and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nicholas, sit down," Richard said, gesturing to a chair across from them. Sharon sat next to her parents, creating a very clear divide in the room. "Thanks for coming," Patricia began, her voice dripping with false warmth. "We wanted to talk to you about some practical matters before the wedding." Nicholas nodded slowly. "Okay." Richard leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "Sharon is our only child. As such, she stands to inherit considerable assets, the dealerships, real estate holdings, investment portfolios. We're talking about wealth that has taken generations to build." "I understand," Nicholas said carefully. "Do you?" Richard's voice sharpened. "Because, from where I'm sitting, you're a high school teacher, making barely above minimum wage, living in an apartment that probably costs less than my monthly car payment. Now, I'm sure you're a nice guy. Sharon seems to think so. But love doesn't pay the bills, and it certainly doesn't protect family assets." Nicholas felt heat rising to his face, but he kept his voice steady. "No, you haven't," Patricia interjected. "And we appreciate that. But marriage changes things. In Washington, we're a community property state. The moment you say, 'I do,' you're entitled to half of everything Sharon earns or acquires during the marriage. Half of her inheritance. Half of her trust fund distributions. We want you to sign a prenuptial agreement," Sharon said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken since they entered the room. Nicholas turned to look at her. "A prenup?" She wouldn't meet his eyes. "It's just a formality. It protects both of us." "It protects me?" Nicholas almost laughed. "Sharon, I have nothing to protect. You know that." Richard pulled out a thick document from a folder on the coffee table. "This agreement is very straightforward. In the event of a divorce, you leave the marriage with exactly what you brought into it. No alimony, no property division, no claims on any Ashford family assets or business interests. Nicholas took the document with trembling hands. As he flipped through the pages, his blood ran cold. This wasn't a standard prenup. This was a complete financial amputation. If they divorced, Nicholas would get nothing. Not even if they were married for 20 years. Not even if they had children. The agreement included clauses about lifestyle expectations. Nicholas would be required to maintain employment in a professional capacity and could not become financially dependent on Sharon. There were provisions about where they would live, in a home selected and purchased by Sharon. What vehicles they would drive financed through Sharon's resources, even how their potential children's education would be funded entirely by Sharon, with Nicholas having no legal claim to college savings accounts. But the most painful clause was near the end. In the event of dissolution of marriage, Party B, Nicholas King, acknowledges that he entered this union with limited financial means and agrees that he has no claim to the elevated lifestyle provided by Party A, Sharon Ashford, during the marriage. Party B. He wasn't even a name in this document. He was just the poor guy, lucky enough to marry up. This is... Nicholas looked up at Sharon. You really want me to sign this? She finally met his eyes, and he saw something there that broke his heart. Certainty. She had already made her decision. It's necessary, she said. Nicholas, be realistic. You make $58,000 a year. I make 3 times that, and I'm set to inherit millions. My father's right, we need to protect what my family has built. What about what we're building? Nicholas asked. Our marriage? Our life together? This is our life together, Richard interrupted. Sharon will provide the home, the lifestyle, the security. You'll provide. Whatever it is you provide. Teaching is noble, I suppose, but it doesn't exactly contribute to the household, does it? Nicholas felt something inside him harden. They had no idea who they were talking to. None of them knew about his grandfather. Nicholas's grandfather, King Wei, had emigrated from Taiwan in the 1962 with almost nothing. He'd worked as a janitor, a cook, a handyman, whatever it took to survive. But he'd been brilliant with money. He'd saved, invested, bought real estate in Seattle when it was still affordable. He'd built a quiet fortune through decades of discipline and smart decisions. When he died 2 years ago, Nicholas had inherited everything. $100 million in stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings. His grandfather's will had been specific. Nicholas was to tell no one until he turned 35, to ensure that anyone who loved him for who he was, not what he had. The inheritance was managed by a trust with strict confidentiality agreements. Nicholas's lawyer, financial advisor, even the IRS knew about it, but no one in his personal life did. Nicholas had honored his grandfather's wishes. He'd continued teaching, living simply, dating normally. When he met Sharon at a mutual friend's wedding 2 years ago, he told her he was just a teacher. And that had been enough, or so he thought. But sitting in this study, being handed a document that essentially called him a gold digger in waiting, Nicholas realized something crucial. Sharon and her family had shown him exactly who they were. They saw him as less than, as someone who needed to be controlled and contained, as a liability to be managed. If you enjoy stories of sweet revenge and shocking family secrets, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one, and tell me where you are watching from. Nicholas set the document down on the coffee table. Can I think about this? Richard frowned. What's there to think about? Either you sign, or there's no wedding. Simple as that. Richard, Patricia said softly, placing a hand on her husband's arm. Then she turned to Nicholas with that same false smile. We understand this might be overwhelming. Take a few days. Review it with a lawyer if you'd like. Though I should mention that any lawyer will tell you this is a very standard agreement for couples with significant wealth disparities. Nicholas stood up. I'd like to talk to Sharon, alone. The parents exchanged glances, but Sharon nodded. Let's go outside. They walked out onto the back terrace, overlooking the manicured lawn that sloped down to the lake. The November air was cold, and Sharon wrapped her arms around herself. Nicholas, I know this feels harsh. Harsh? He turned to face her. Sharon, that document basically says I'm marrying you for your money and need to be legally prevented from taking it. No, of course not. But, she hesitated. Nicholas, you have to understand my position. I've worked hard for what I have, and my family's wealth, it's their legacy. I can't just pretend the financial reality doesn't exist. I never asked you to, Nicholas said. I've never once made you pay for anything. I've never hinted that I wanted access to your money. I proposed to you with a ring I saved 6 months to buy. I've been planning a honeymoon in Portland because that's what I can afford. I've never tried to be something I'm not. And I love that about you, Sharon said, but her voice was hollow. You're genuine. You're kind. You're real. But Nicholas, marriage is also a legal contract, a business arrangement, in some ways. And my parents are right, we need to be practical. Practical, Nicholas repeated. He looked at the woman he'd planned to spend his life with and saw a stranger. When you said yes to my proposal, when you told me you loved me, was any of that real? Or were you always planning this? Sharon's eyes filled with tears. It's all real. I do love you. But I also love my family. And I can't just ignore their concerns. They've built something incredible, and I'm responsible for protecting it. Even if it means you don't trust me, it's not about trust. It's about being smart. Nicholas nodded slowly. Okay. I'll take the document to a lawyer. I'll review it. And then, I'll let you know my decision. He turned to walk away, but Sharon caught his arm. Nicholas, please don't make this bigger than it is. It's just paperwork. It doesn't change how I feel about you. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. Doesn't it? Nicholas didn't wait for an answer. He walked back through the house, past the study where Sharon's parents sat discussing something in low voices, and out to his car. As he drove away from the mansion, his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. They thought he was desperate. They thought he needed Sharon's money so badly he'd sign away any dignity to keep her. They thought he was just a poor teacher who'd gotten lucky landing a rich girlfriend. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Nicholas made 3 phone calls. The first was to James Morrison, the lawyer who managed his trust. The second was to his financial advisor, Patricia King. No relation. The third was to a family friend who practiced divorce law. By the afternoon, he was sitting in James Morrison's downtown Seattle office, a space that overlooked Elliott Bay and probably cost more per month than Nicholas's yearly rent. Let me see this prenup, James said, adjusting his glasses. Nicholas handed over the document. He watched as his lawyer's expression changed from neutral to incredulous to something close to anger. This is... James looked up. Nicholas, this is one of the most one-sided agreements I've ever seen. And I've been practicing family law for 30 years. That bad? It's not just bad, it's insulting. Look at this clause here. They're essentially saying that if you're married for 50 years and Sharon decides she's done, you leave with nothing. Not even credit for any indirect contributions you might have made to her career or well-being. And this section about children? If you have kids and divorce, she gets sole financial control over everything related to their upbringing. You'd essentially be a visitor in your own children's lives. Nicholas leaned back in his chair. So I shouldn't sign it. Hell no, you shouldn't sign it. But Nicholas, James set the document down. I have to ask. Do you want to marry this woman? That was the question, wasn't it? Nicholas had spent all night thinking about it. He'd replayed every moment of his relationship with Sharon. The first time they met, when she'd laughed at his jokes about molecular bonding. The weekend they'd spent hiking in the Cascades, when she'd seemed content sleeping in a tent and eating trail mix. The quiet evenings, watching movies in his tiny apartment, her head on his shoulder, promising him that this was all she needed. Had any of that been real? Or had she always seen him as a project, a charity case, someone she was slumming with until reality set in? I thought I did, Nicholas said quietly. But the woman I fell in love with wouldn't have asked me to sign this. The woman I fell in love with saw me as an equal, not as a liability. James nodded. Then you have a decision to make. You can walk away now, or... He paused. Or you can sign it. Why would I sign it? Because you have something they don't know about, James said. Your grandfather's inheritance. Nicholas, if you sign this prenup and marry Sharon, your $100 million stays entirely yours. Community property laws don't apply to assets you bring into the marriage. The prenup protects her money from you, but it also protects your money from her. Nicholas blinked. He hadn't thought about it that way. If you divorce, James continued, she gets nothing from your inheritance. Not $1. Meanwhile, according to this agreement, you're also not entitled to anything of hers. You'd leave the marriage exactly as you entered it, except you'd be $100 million richer than she thinks you are. So, this prenup, Nicholas felt a slow smile spreading across his face. It actually protects me more than it protects her. Exactly. The irony is beautiful, isn't it? They're so focused on protecting their precious millions that they've made sure you keep your hundreds of millions completely separate. Nicholas sat with this information, feeling something shift inside him. He thought about Sharon's face in that study, the way she'd sided with her parents, the way she'd reduced their relationship to a business transaction, the way she'd essentially told him he wasn't good enough. He could walk away now. Call off the wedding, move on, find someone who loved him for who he actually was. That would be the clean, simple solution. Or, I want to marry her, Nicholas heard himself say. James raised his eyebrows. You're sure? I want to marry her, and I want to sign the prenup. Nicholas, what are you planning? Nicholas thought about his grandfather, the man who'd taught him that patience was its own form of power, who'd shown him that sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people reveal their true character. I'm going to be the best husband I can be, Nicholas said. I'm going to love Sharon, support her, be there for her. And I'm going to watch very carefully to see who she really is. Whether the woman I fell in love with is still in there, or whether her parents have turned her into something else. And if it's the latter, then, in a few years, when I turn 35 and can access my inheritance freely, we'll see how she handles the truth. We'll see how much that prenup meant to her when she realizes she married someone worth $100 million and locked herself out of every penny. James leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing on his lips. You know, your grandfather would have loved this. He taught me to never let people underestimate me, Nicholas said. He said that the moment someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them, but you should also give them enough rope to hang themselves with. That's surprisingly vindictive for a chemistry teacher. Chemistry is all about reactions, Nicholas said. I'm just setting up the experiment. Let's see what happens when you add pressure and heat. They spent the next hour going over the prenup in detail. Nicholas signed where he needed to sign, initialed where he needed to initial. When it was done, James put the document in an envelope. You'll need to bring this back to Sharon and her parents. I'd recommend not showing any anger or resentment. Play it like you've accepted your place. That won't be hard, Nicholas said. They already think I have no other options. That evening, Nicholas returned to the Ashford mansion. This time, only Sharon was home. She opened the door, looking exhausted, like she hadn't slept. Nicholas, she said, I wasn't sure you'd come back. He held up the envelope. I signed it. Her eyes widened. You did? My lawyer looked it over. He said it's a standard agreement for people in our situation. The lie came easily. And you're right, we need to be practical. Sharon threw her arms around him, relief evident in every line of her body. Thank you. God. Thank you. I was so worried you'd be angry. I'm not angry, Nicholas said, and that was true. He wasn't angry. He was something far more dangerous. He was curious. Curious to see what would happen next. Curious to see if Sharon would prove him wrong. Curious to see if the love he'd thought they had was real or just another transaction. They stood in the doorway, Sharon holding him tight, and Nicholas looked over her shoulder at the mansion beyond. at the wealth and privilege and absolute certainty that they were better than him. They had no idea what was coming. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Nicholas should do next. The wedding took place on a sunny March afternoon at a vineyard in Woodinville. Sharon wore a designer gown that cost more than Nicholas's annual salary, and her father spared no expense on the reception. 300 guests, a live band, champagne that probably cost $500 a bottle. Nicholas's side of the venue was noticeably smaller. A few teacher friends, some former students, his aunt from California. His parents had passed away years ago, and his grandfather's old friends were too elderly to travel. During the reception, Nicholas overheard Richard Ashford talking to a business associate near the bar. "Yeah, Sharon married a teacher," Richard said, his voice carrying over the music. "Not what we hoped for, but what can you do? At least we got an ironclad prenup. The kids got nothing. So there's nothing to lose." Nicholas kept his expression neutral and continued dancing with his new wife. She looked beautiful, radiant, genuinely happy. For a moment, he let himself hope that maybe this would work. Maybe the prenup had been her parents' idea, and now that they were married, things would be different. They honeymooned in Portland, just as Nicholas had planned. Sharon had offered to pay for Hawaii or Europe, but Nicholas insisted on sticking to his budget. He wanted to see how she'd handle it, whether she could still find joy in simple things, or whether her family's wealth had spoiled her beyond repair. The first 2 days were good. They explored Powell's books, ate at food trucks, walked through the Japanese garden. Sharon seemed content, even charmed by the modest hotel Nicholas had chosen in the Pearl District. But on the third day, she got a call from her mother. "You're staying where?" Patricia's voice was loud enough that Nicholas could hear it across the hotel room. "Sharon, honey, why are you slumming it? Just use your credit card and upgrade. Get a suite at the Heathman at least." "Mom, it's fine. Nicholas planned this." Nicholas planned a honeymoon on a teacher's budget. How romantic. The sarcasm was thick. "Darling, you're an Ashford now, legally, but you're still an Ashford financially. Act like it." Sharon hung up looking uncomfortable. "She means well, does she?" Nicholas asked quietly. They didn't talk about it again, but something had shifted. Sharon started checking her phone more, comparing their activities to what her friends were posting from their honeymoons in Bali and the Maldives. The contentment from the first few days evaporated, replaced by a restless disappointment she tried to hide but couldn't quite manage. When they returned to Seattle, reality set in. They moved into a townhouse that Sharon had purchased in Capitol Hill, a beautiful 3-bedroom with a view of downtown. Nicholas had offered to contribute to the mortgage, but Sharon waved him off. "It's my investment property," she said. "The prenup makes it clear. What's mine is mine." "Right," Nicholas said. "Of course." He continued teaching at Roosevelt High School, coming home each day to a house that felt more like Sharon's than theirs. She decorated it without asking his input. She'd chosen furniture, art, even the dishes. When Nicholas suggested they pick out a couch together, she'd laughed. "Nicholas, no offense, but your taste is a bit budget-conscious. I've got this." Nicholas watched as Sharon transformed into someone he barely recognized. The woman who'd seemed happy eating Thai food in his tiny apartment now insisted on dinner reservations at Seattle's most expensive restaurants. The woman who'd loved hiking now preferred spin classes at an exclusive gym that cost $300 a month. The woman who'd told him that love mattered more than money now seemed to measure everything by its price tag. Her parents visited often, and each visit was a subtle reminder of Nicholas's place in the family hierarchy. "How's the teaching going?" Richard would ask, the way someone might ask about a hobby rather than a career. "Good," Nicholas would say. "We're starting a unit on thermodynamics." "Fascinating," Richard would reply, in a tone that meant the exact opposite. Then he'd turn to Sharon. "Sweetheart, I wanted to talk to you about the Q3 numbers for the dealerships. We're looking at expanding into Spokane, and I'd love your input on the marketing strategy." Business discussions happened around Nicholas, never with him. Financial decisions were made without his knowledge. When Sharon's trust fund distributed $200,000 that summer, she bought a new BMW without mentioning it until the car appeared in their driveway. "Surprise," she'd said, genuinely expecting him to be excited. "You bought a $70,000 car without telling me?" Nicholas had asked. "It's my money," Sharon said, her voice cooling. "The prenup was clear about that, remember? Besides, you drive that old Civic. I needed something reliable." Nicholas continued driving his 10-year-old Honda, and he continued teaching high school chemistry, and he continued playing the role of the poor husband who'd married up. But behind the scenes, his wealth was growing. His financial advisor, Patricia King, sent him quarterly reports that he reviewed in his classroom during lunch breaks. The stock market was performing well. His real estate holdings in downtown Seattle had appreciated by 15% in just 1 year. His portfolio was now worth $108 million and climbing. He could have bought Sharon 20 BMWs without blinking. He could have purchased a mansion that made the Ashford estate look modest. But instead, he graded papers in a townhouse he didn't own, while his wife's family treated him like hired help. "You're playing a dangerous game," James Morrison told him during one of their quarterly meetings. They met in coffee shops, never James's office, to avoid any chance of Sharon finding out. "How long are you planning to keep this up?" "Until I'm 35, Nicholas said. "That's when my grandfather's trust restrictions lift. That's when I can make my own decisions about the money." "That's 3 years away. You think you can maintain this charade for 3 more years?" Nicholas sipped his coffee. "You know what the interesting thing is? I'm not maintaining a charade. I'm actually being myself. I'm teaching, I'm living simply, I'm being a good husband. Sharon and her family are the ones who've created this narrative that I'm less than them. I'm just letting them believe what they want to believe. And when you turn 35, then we'll see if Sharon married me for love or for the illusion of control." The first year of marriage passed. Then the second. Nicholas remained patient, observant, taking mental notes of every slight, every condescending comment, every moment when Sharon chose her family's opinion over their partnership. There were good moments, too, which made it more complicated. Quiet Sunday mornings, when Sharon seemed like her old self, laughing at his jokes over pancakes. Evenings when they'd watch movies and she'd curl up against him, whispering that she loved him. Times when Nicholas genuinely believed that maybe, underneath the wealth and privilege, the woman he'd fallen in love with was still there. But then her parents would visit, or her friends would come over with their investment banker husbands, or she'd get her quarterly trust fund distribution and the walls would go back up. Nicholas would become Sharon's teacher husband. Again, a quirky choice, a charity project. Proof of her open-mindedness in marrying beneath her station. The breaking point came in November 2026, almost exactly 2 years after that first prenup conversation. Sharon's company, the tech startup where she worked as marketing director, got acquired by a larger firm. Her stock options paid out. She came home one evening with news that should have been celebrated together. "Nicholas, you won't believe it," she said, practically vibrating with excitement. "The acquisition went through. My options were worth $1.2 million. After taxes, I'm clearing about $750,000. "That's incredible," Nicholas said, and he meant it. He was genuinely happy for her success. "You worked hard for that." "I know. And I've been thinking." She pulled out her laptop, opening a real estate website. "Look at this house in Medina. It's right near my parents. 4 bedrooms, waterfront, just listed at $3.2 million. With my payout and my trust fund, I can afford the down payment." Nicholas felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You want to move to Medina? Why not? It's a great investment. And it would be nice to be closer to family. Sharon, my school is in Seattle. That's a 40-minute commute on a good day." She waved her hand dismissively. "So you'll commute? Lots of people do it. Nicholas, this is a $3.2 million house. Do you know what kind of appreciation we're talking about? This is generational wealth." "You mean your generational wealth," Nicholas said quietly. According to the prenup, I'd have no claim to it. Sharon's expression hardened. Don't start with that again. We've been over this. Yes, it would be my house. But you'd live in it. You'd benefit from it. What's the problem? The problem is that you're making massive life decisions without even considering my input. You're not asking if I want to move. You're telling me we're moving because you can afford to buy a house. Because I can afford it, Sharon's voice rose. Nicholas, I love you, but let's be realistic here. You make $62,000 a year now. I just made more in one stock payout than you'll make in the next decade of teaching. We don't make decisions 50-50 when the financial contribution is 90-10. There it was. The truth she'd been dancing around for 2 years, finally spoken aloud. Nicholas stood up from the couch. I need to go for a walk. Nicholas, don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I just need some air. He walked out of the townhouse and drove to Discovery Park, where he sat on a bench overlooking Puget Sound as the sun set. His phone buzzed with texts from Sharon, first apologetic, then defensive, then angry that he wasn't responding. He thought about his grandfather, who died believing that Nicholas would use the inheritance wisely. Who'd built that fortune from nothing, working jobs that Richard Ashford would have considered beneath him? Who'd taught Nicholas that wealth was a tool, not an identity? Money doesn't make you better than anyone else, his grandfather had told him once. It just reveals who you already are. When you get this inheritance, watch how people treat you. The ones who love you when you have nothing are the ones worth keeping. Sharon hadn't loved him when she thought he had nothing. She'd loved him despite it, seeing him as a project, a good deed, proof of her own magnanimity. And now, with her own wealth growing, she'd stopped even pretending they were equals. Nicholas pulled out his phone and called James Morrison. I want to know my options, Nicholas said when his lawyer answered. Not for divorce. Not yet. But I want to know what happens when I turn 35. What can I do with the inheritance? How public does it have to be? Legally, once you hit 35, the trust restrictions lift, James explained. You can spend it, invest it, donate it, whatever you want. But Nicholas, if you're still married to Sharon, she's going to find out eventually. Property records are public. Major investments leave paper trails. You can't stay secretly wealthy forever. I don't want to stay secretly wealthy forever, Nicholas said. I just want to control when and how she finds out. Why? What are you planning? Nicholas watched the sunset paint the sound in shades of orange and gold. I'm planning to give her exactly what she asked for. A marriage where money matters more than partnership, where financial contribution determines worth. I'm going to let her live in that reality for a while, and then I'm going to show her what she actually chose. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Nicholas's situation. Over the next 6 months, Sharon bought the house in Medina. Nicholas commuted 45 minutes each way to Roosevelt High School, leaving before dawn and returning after dark. The new house was beautiful hardwood floors, a gourmet kitchen, a master suite larger than his old apartment. But it felt like a museum, not a home. Everything was white and pristine and expensive, and Nicholas was terrified to touch anything. Sharon's parents visited weekly now, since they lived just 10 minutes away. Richard would walk through the house, nodding approvingly at his daughter's investment. Patricia would host dinner parties, where Nicholas was introduced as Sharon's husband, with no mention of what he did, as if being a teacher was too embarrassing to acknowledge. At one particularly awful dinner party in April 2027, Nicholas overheard Sharon talking to her college friends in the kitchen. I love Nicholas, obviously, Sharon was saying. But sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to marry someone on my level, you know? Like, when I got the acquisition payout, I was so excited to tell him, and his first reaction was worry about his commute. Not congratulations, not celebration, just concern about his little teaching job. Her friends made sympathetic noises. You're so patient with him, one of them said. I don't think I could handle the income disparity. Well, the prenup helps. Sharon said, laughing. At least I know he's not here for the money. He literally can't get any of it, even if he wanted to. Nicholas set down his wineglass and walked out of the house. He drove back to Seattle, back to his old neighborhood in Greenwood, and parked outside his old apartment building. The Thai restaurant was still there, and the same smells wafted up from the street. He remembered being happy here, poor but happy. He pulled out his phone and looked at his most recent portfolio statement. $114 million. He could buy this entire building with cash. He could buy the whole block. He could write a check for more money than Sharon's family had probably made in 3 generations of car dealerships. But he didn't. Instead, he drove back to Medina, back to the house that would never be his, and slept in the guest room because Sharon was already asleep and he couldn't stand the thought of lying next to her. The final straw came in September 2027, 3 months before Nicholas's 35th birthday. Sharon announced at dinner that she was pregnant. Nicholas stared at her, processing the news. "You're pregnant?" 12 weeks, she said, beaming. "I wanted to wait until the 2nd trimester to tell you. I've already told my parents." "They're thrilled." "You told your parents before you told me?" "I told them when I was 6 weeks. I needed to tell someone, and you've been so distant lately." She reached across the table for his hand. "Nicholas, this is good news. We're going to be parents." Nicholas should have been happy. He should have been thrilled. But all he could think about was the prenup, the clause about children, the provision that gave Sharon complete financial control over any kids they had. "Sharon," he said carefully, "have you thought about how this changes things? With your work? With our finances? I'll take maternity leave, obviously. But my company has great benefits, fully paid, for 4 months. And my trust fund will help cover childcare if we need it. Don't worry about the money part. I've got it handled. What about what I want? What about my input on how we raise this child?" Sharon frowned. "Of course, you'll have input. You're the father. But Nicholas, let's be practical. I make the money, so I'll make the major financial decisions. That's just reality. It doesn't mean I don't value you." Nicholas stood up from the table. "I need to show you something." "What? Now?" "Nicholas, I just told you we're having a baby." "Now," he said firmly. "Get your coat. We're going for a drive." Sharon looked confused, but followed him to the garage. Nicholas got into his old Honda Civic, and Sharon climbed in beside him. Still baffled. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." He drove back to Seattle, to the Greenwood neighborhood, to his old apartment building. Then he kept driving, taking her on a tour she'd never asked for. He showed her the house where he'd grown up, a modest rambler in Ballard that his parents had bought in the 1990 seconds. He showed her the cemetery where his parents and grandfather were buried. He showed her Roosevelt High School, where he'd worked for a decade, where he'd taught thousands of students chemistry and maybe, occasionally, how to believe in themselves. "Nicholas, what is this?" Sharon asked. "Some kind of nostalgic tour? I don't understand what this has to do with." "This is who I am," Nicholas said quietly. "This is where I come from. These neighborhoods, these people, this life. And for 2 years, you've treated all of it like it's less than, like I'm less than. I've never said that. You don't have to say it. You show it every day. When you make decisions without me. When you introduce me to your friends, like I'm an accessory. When you tell people I'm just a teacher like it's something to apologize for. When you tell your parents about our baby before you tell me." Sharon was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, softly, "Nicholas, I'm sorry if I've made you feel that way. But you have to understand. I was raised in a certain world. Money matters. Success matters. And I'm trying to build something here. A life for our family. And sometimes that means I have to make hard decisions." "Hard decisions," Nicholas repeated. "Like deciding our baby will grow up in Medina, surrounded by wealth and privilege, Learning that some people matter more than others because of the size of their bank accounts? Is that really so bad? Sharon asked. Would you rather our child grow up struggling? Wondering where the next meal comes from? Living paycheck to paycheck? I'd rather our child grow up knowing that people have value beyond their net worth, Nicholas said. That a teacher can be just as important as a CEO. That success isn't measured only in dollars. Sharon looked out the window at the darkened streets. You're being naive. The world doesn't work that way. Your world doesn't work that way, Nicholas corrected. But there are other worlds. Other ways to live. And I've been patient for 2 years, waiting to see if you'd remember that. Waiting to see if the woman I fell in love with was still in there somewhere. And? Sharon's voice was sharp now. What's your conclusion? Am I not good enough for you? Me? With my trust fund? And my career? And my house? And my family? Nicholas pulled up in front of the Medina house, her house, as she never let him forget. He turned off the engine and looked at his wife. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in months. I'll tell you what, he said. Let's make it to my 35th birthday. December 1st. 3 months from now. And then we'll have a real conversation about our marriage, about our future, about what kind of life we want to build for this baby. Why your birthday specifically? Because that's when some things will change, Nicholas said. And I want to see how you handle it. Sharon stared at him, confused and slightly afraid. Nicholas, you're scaring me. What's going to change? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everything. Absolutely everything. They went inside the house, and Sharon went straight to bed, claiming pregnancy exhaustion. Nicholas sat in the living room, her living room, and counted down the days until December 1st. 93 days, until his 35th birthday. 93 days until Sharon Ashford learned that she'd married a man worth $100 million. 93 days until the prenup she'd been so proud of became the biggest mistake of her life. Nicholas pulled out his phone and texted James Morrison. Start preparing the paperwork. On December 2nd, I want to move $50 million into visible assets. Property, investments, charitable foundation, everything above board and impossible to miss. Let's see how she reacts when the poor teacher becomes the rich husband. James texted back immediately. You're sure about this? Nicholas looked around the pristine house, thinking about the baby growing inside his wife. Thinking about 2 years of condescension and dismissal and being treated like he didn't matter. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he typed back. The experiment was almost over. Soon, he'd have the results. And something told him Sharon wasn't going to like them. Nicholas's 35th birthday fell on a Tuesday. He woke up early, as he always did for school. But this morning felt different. Today, the trust restrictions lifted. Today, he could finally access and control his inheritance freely. Today, everything changed. Sharon was still asleep, her hand resting on her growing belly. She was 5 months pregnant now, showing enough that her friends had thrown her an elaborate baby shower the week before. Nicholas had attended, smiled politely, and listened to endless conversations about nursery designers and $2,000 strollers, while Sharon's friends made jokes about how Nicholas would need to pick up summer school teaching to afford diapers. He'd said nothing, just smiled and waited. Now, as dawn broke over Lake Washington, Nicholas got dressed and drove to Roosevelt High School. He taught his regular classes, explaining redox reactions to 10th graders, helping a struggling student understand stoichiometry, eating lunch in his classroom while grading labs. To anyone watching, it was just another Tuesday for Nicholas King, the underpaid chemistry teacher. But at 3:15 p.m., when the final bell rang and his students filed out, Nicholas locked his classroom door and made a phone call. James, it's done. I'm 35. Happy birthday, his lawyer said. Ready to start phase 2? Let's do it. Over the next 3 hours, while Sharon thought Nicholas was at a faculty meeting, he sat in James Morrison's office and signed papers. So many papers, He established the King Family Foundation with an initial funding of $20 million, dedicated to providing scholarships for students from low-income families pursuing STEM careers. The foundation would be public, with Nicholas listed as founder and chairman. He purchased a property in Madison Park, a waterfront home with 6 bedrooms, a home office, and a separate guest house. Price tag, $8.5 million, paid in cash. The deed would be recorded publicly within 48 hours. He invested $15 million in a portfolio of blue-chip stocks under his own name, no longer hidden in the trust structure. He donated $5 million to Roosevelt High School's science department, the largest single donation in the school's history. Every transaction was legal, above board, and completely traceable. By the end of the week, anyone searching Nicholas King's name would find a very different picture than the struggling teacher Sharon thought she'd married. The foundation announcement goes public tomorrow morning, James said. The Seattle Times is running a feature about it. Local businessman and educator establishes multi-million-dollar scholarship fund. They want to interview you. Good, Nicholas said. Make sure they mention I'm a chemistry teacher at Roosevelt, and that I'm married to Sharon Ashford. They will. Nicholas, are you ready for what happens next? Nicholas thought about 2 years of condescension. 2 years of being treated like a charity case. 2 years of watching the woman he'd loved transform into someone he barely recognized. I'm ready. He drove home to Medina as the sun was setting. Sharon's BMW was in the driveway, along with her parents' Mercedes. Great. An audience. Nicholas walked into the house to find Sharon, Richard, and Patricia in the living room, looking at paint swatches for the nursery. There you are, Sharon said. Where have you been? I texted you 3 times. Faculty meeting ran long, Nicholas said. Then, I had some errands. Richard barely looked up. Sharon, I still think you should do the nursery in sage green. It's gender neutral and photographs well for social media. Dad's right, Patricia added. When you post pictures, you want it to look elegant, not too childish. Nicholas set his briefcase down. Actually, I have some news about the nursery. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him. We won't be needing to paint it, Nicholas continued. We're moving. Sharon laughed. What are you talking about? We just bought this house a year ago. You bought this house, Nicholas corrected gently, and you'll keep it. But I bought a different house, for us. In Madison Park? Silence. Nicholas, Sharon said slowly, what are you talking about? You can't afford. I bought it this afternoon. 6 bedrooms, waterfront, plenty of space for the baby. We can move in next month. Richard stood up. Is this some kind of joke? Boy, you make $62,000 a year. You can't afford a house in Madison Park. Have you been gambling? Taking out loans you can't repay? No loans, Nicholas said. I paid cash. $8.5 million. The room went completely still. Sharon's face had gone pale. Nicholas, that's not funny. It's not a joke. Nicholas pulled out his phone and showed them the deed. Already signed and notarized. It's done. The house is mine. Well, mine according to community property law, which means technically it's ours. But the prenup you insisted on means you have no claim to it if we divorce. Ironic, isn't it? Patricia gripped her husband's arm. This is insane. Where would you get $8.5 million? From my inheritance, Nicholas said simply. My grandfather died in 2022 and left me everything. About $100 million in stocks, bonds, and real estate. I've been managing it quietly for the past 2.5 years, watching it grow. It's worth about $117 million now. Sharon stood up, her hand on her belly. No, you're lying. You're a teacher. You drive you live, we signed a prenup because you had nothing. I had nothing you knew about, Nicholas corrected. The prenup protects your assets from me. Remember? It also protects my assets from you. Every penny of my inheritance stays completely separate. You made sure of that. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You've been lying to us for 2 years? I haven't lied once, Nicholas said calmly. I told you I was a chemistry teacher. I am. I told you I lived in a small apartment and drove an old car. I did. I never claimed to be anything other than what I was. You're the ones who made assumptions. You're the ones who decided my worth based on my salary and my zip code. But the prenup, Sharon whispered. Nicholas, if you had money all along, why did you sign it? Why did you let us treat you like? She stopped, but Nicholas finished the sentence for her. Like I was less than you? Like I was lucky to marry into the Ashford family? Like I needed to be controlled and contained and kept in my place? His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. Because I wanted to see who you really were, Sharon. I wanted to know if you loved me for me, or if you loved the idea of being magnanimous. I wanted to see if you could be happy with someone you thought had nothing. Tears were streaming down Sharon's face now. I do love you. You love the version of me that makes you feel superior, Nicholas said. You love having a husband you can manage and control. You love being the one with all the power in the relationship. He paused. But that's over now. Patricia had recovered from her shock and now looked furious. You manipulated her. You tricked her into marrying you under false pretenses. Did I? Nicholas turned to her. Sharon is the one who demanded a prenup. Sharon is the one who made our marriage a business transaction. I just protected my assets the same way she protected hers. Isn't that what you told me to do, Patricia? Be practical? This is different, Richard sputtered. You let us believe. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, Nicholas interrupted. That poor people are somehow less worthy. That a teacher couldn't possibly have value beyond his paycheck. That money equals worth. I let you live in that reality for 2 years. How did it feel? Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Sharon should do next. Sharon sank back onto the couch, her hands shaking. The foundation. I saw something on my news feed earlier about a King family foundation. That was you? $20 million for STEM scholarships, Nicholas confirmed. It goes public tomorrow. The Seattle Times is running a story. They're very interested in the chemistry teacher who's giving away millions to help kids like the ones I teach. You're going to humiliate us, Patricia said quietly. Everyone will know. All our friends, all our business associates. They'll know that we made you sign a prenup when you were worth 100 times what we're worth. Actually, Nicholas said, the Ashford family dealerships are worth about $45 million total, according to the public business valuations I looked up. So I'm worth a bit more than twice what you're worth, not 100 times. Let's be accurate. The fact that Nicholas had researched their net worth seemed to disturb them more than anything else. Richard sat down heavily. What do you want? Money? Is this some elaborate scheme to renegotiate the prenup? I don't want your money, Nicholas said. I never did. That was the whole point. Then what do you want? Sharon asked, her voice breaking. Nicholas looked at his wife, at the woman he'd married, at the mother of his unborn child, at the person who'd spent 2 years showing him exactly who she was when she thought she had all the power. I want honesty, he said. I want to know if there's any part of the woman I fell in love with still in there. The woman who laughed at my jokes in that tiny apartment, the woman who said she didn't care about money, the woman who promised to be my partner, not my benefactor. Sharon was crying openly now. Nicholas, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize, I didn't mean to make you feel, but you did, Nicholas said. Every day for 2 years, you made me feel like I wasn't enough. Your parents made me feel like I was a burden you were graciously tolerating. And the worst part? You let them. You agreed with them. I was wrong, Sharon said. Nicholas, I was so wrong. Please. Please. We can fix this. Nicholas pulled out a folder from his briefcase papers James had prepared that afternoon. These are divorce papers. I'm not filing them yet, but they're ready. Sharon's face went white. You're leaving me? I'm pregnant with your child, and I will be a father to that child, no matter what happens between us, Nicholas said firmly. The prenup makes that complicated, since you have financial control over any children we have. But my lawyer assures me that we can work something out. Shared custody, co-parenting arrangements. I'll be there for my kid, Sharon. Always. But not for me? Her voice was small, broken. Nicholas sat down across from her. That depends on you. I'm giving you a choice right now, the same choice you gave me 2 years ago. We can stay married, but it has to be a real marriage. Equal partners. No more decisions made without the other person. No more treating me like I'm less than. No more letting your parents dictate our lives. Anything, Sharon said quickly. I'll do anything. Or, Nicholas continued, we can divorce. Split everything according to the prenup. Which means you keep your assets, and I keep mine. We co-parent our child. We move on with our lives. You can find someone your parents approve of, someone who fits into your world better. Richard stood up. Now wait, just a minute. You can't just come in here. And, yes, he can, Sharon said quietly. She was looking at Nicholas with something like recognition in her eyes, seeing him, maybe for the first time, as an actual person, rather than a project. He can absolutely do this, because I asked for it. I made our marriage a business transaction. I treated him like an employee instead of a husband. And he's giving me the same respect I gave him. She paused, which is none. Patricia started to say something, but Sharon held up her hand. Mom, Dad, I need you to leave. Sharon, you're upset. You shouldn't make decisions when you're emotional. I said leave. Sharon's voice was firm now, with an authority Nicholas hadn't heard in years. This is my marriage. My mess. And I need to fix it without you here. The Ashfords exchanged glances, but they gathered their things and headed for the door. Richard paused on his way out, looking at Nicholas. You played us, he said. No, Nicholas replied. I just let you show me who you were. And I remembered it. When her parents were gone, Sharon and Nicholas sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. I've been awful to you. Yes, Nicholas agreed. There was no point in softening it. I don't know when it happened. When I stopped being the person who didn't care about money. When I started measuring everything by what it cost. She wiped her eyes. My parents raised me to value wealth above almost everything. And when I met you, I thought I'd escaped that. I thought I was better than that. But the moment they questioned our relationship, I folded. I let them convince me that their way was right. You did more than fold, Nicholas said. You became them. You became the exact thing you said you didn't want to be. Sharon nodded, accepting this. If you divorce me, I'll understand. I deserve it. Probably, Nicholas agreed. But there's a baby coming. And I'd like to at least try to make this work before we give up completely. Why? Sharon asked. After everything I've done, why would you want to try? Nicholas thought about his grandfather, about the lessons on patience and character, about the belief that people could change if they truly wanted to. Because 2 years ago, there was a woman I loved, he said. A woman who was kind and funny and didn't care that I lived in a 600 square foot apartment. I'm hoping she's still in there somewhere. I'm hoping she wants to come back. Sharon reached for his hand. She does, Nicholas, she really does, but I don't know how to be her anymore. Then we'll figure it out together, Nicholas said. But it has to be together. Really together. Not you making decisions and me following along. Not your parents running our lives. Not money determining who has power in this relationship. How do we do that? Nicholas pulled out his phone and showed her pictures of the Madison Park house. We start by moving. Away from your parents. Into a space that's ours. Then we set boundaries. Your parents don't get to comment on my job, my car, my life choices. They don't get to make decisions about our child. We're a family, you, me, and the baby. Not an extension of the Ashford empire. Sharon looked at the pictures, and something like hope crossed her face. It's beautiful. But Nicholas, $8.5 million. You spent that on a house. For us. For you, Nicholas corrected. For the baby. Because even after 2 years of being treated like I didn't matter, I still love you enough to want you to be comfortable. I still want you to be happy. I don't deserve you, Sharon whispered. Maybe not right now, Nicholas said. But maybe you can earn it. Maybe we can both become better versions of ourselves. They sat together in the living room of the house that would never be theirs, holding hands, feeling their baby move between them, and tried to imagine a different future. The next morning, the Seattle Times ran the story about the King Family Foundation. By noon, Nicholas's phone was flooded with calls, reporters wanting interviews, former students sending congratulations, colleagues at Roosevelt expressing shock and disbelief. The most interesting call came from Richard Ashford. I want to apologize, he said stiffly. For what specifically? Nicholas asked, not letting him off easy. A long pause. For underestimating you. For treating you as less than. For influencing my daughter to do the same. Are you apologizing because you mean it? Or because I'm not poor anymore? Another pause. Longer this time. I'm apologizing because I was wrong about your character. The money. Well, the money just proves that I was wrong about everything. The money doesn't prove anything about my character, Nicholas said. I was the same person when you thought I was poor. That's the point. Richard, I didn't change. Your treatment of me changed. I understand that now. Do you? Because I'm not convinced. I think you're apologizing because it's embarrassing to have been so wrong. Not because you've actually learned anything about judging people based on their bank accounts. Richard's voice hardened. What do you want from me, Nicholas? Blood? I want you to be a better grandfather than you were a father-in-law, Nicholas said. I want you to teach my child that people have value beyond their net worth. I want you to respect people who make less money than you do. Can you do that? I can try. Then we'll start there, Nicholas said. But Richard, if you ever speak to or about Sharon, the way you've spoken to and about me these past 2 years, we're done. You won't see your grandchild. You won't be part of our lives. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Nicholas hung up, feeling both satisfied and exhausted. Teaching people lessons was harder than teaching chemistry. Over the next month, Nicholas and Sharon moved into the Madison Park house. They set up a nursery together, choosing paint colors and furniture as a team. They established boundaries with her parents. Weekly dinners, yes, but no more impromptu visits or business discussions that excluded Nicholas. Sharon went to therapy, working through her issues with money and status. She started asking Nicholas about his day and actually listening to the answers. She met his teacher friends for coffee and didn't compare their lives to her corporate friends' lives. Small steps, but real ones. Nicholas continued teaching, but he also began work on the King Family Foundation. The first scholarship recipients were announced in January. 10 students from low-income families, each receiving full rides to study STEM fields at universities across the country. Nicholas met with each of them personally, and when they asked how he'd accumulated so much wealth, he told them the truth. My grandfather worked 3 jobs and invested wisely, he said. He taught me that wealth is a responsibility, not an identity. That money is a tool to help others, not a weapon to hurt them. And that the most important thing you can do with resources is share them with people who need them. The baby was born in March 2028, a girl they named Grace King. Sharon's parents were there at the hospital, appropriately humble and respectful. Richard held his granddaughter with tears in his eyes, and for the first time since Nicholas had met him, he looked like a human being instead of a business tycoon. She's perfect, Richard whispered. She is, Nicholas agreed. And she's going to grow up knowing that her grandfather was a successful businessman. Her grandmother is a philanthropist, her mother is a marketing director, and her father is a chemistry teacher. All of those things are equally valuable. All of those things matter. Richard met his eyes. Understood. When they brought Grace home to the Madison Park house, Nicholas stood in the nursery holding his daughter while Sharon slept down the hall. He thought about his grandfather, about the journey that had brought him here, about the lessons he'd learned about love and money and what really mattered. Your great-grandfather would have loved you, he whispered to Grace. He taught me that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so successful that the people who doubted you have to live with knowing they were wrong. But he also taught me something even more important. That forgiveness is possible if people are willing to change. Your mom is trying to change. Your grandparents are trying. And I'm trying to be patient enough to let them. Grace yawned and curled closer to his chest. I'm going to teach you about chemistry, Nicholas continued softly. About how reactions work, how pressure and heat create change, how some bonds are stronger than others. But I'm also going to teach you that people are more than their bank accounts. That kindness matters more than wealth. That being underestimated is an opportunity, not an insult. He looked around the nursery, painted a soft yellow they'd chosen together, filled with furniture they'd assembled together, in a house he'd bought to give his family a fresh start. And I'm going to teach you that prenups are important, he added with a smile. Because sometimes, protecting what's yours means everyone gets to keep what's theirs, even when they don't realize what that means. Sharon and Nicholas's marriage didn't magically fix itself overnight. There were still arguments about money, still moments when her family's influence crept back in, still times when Nicholas had to remind everyone, including Sharon, that respect wasn't something you earned with wealth, it was something you gave freely to all people. But they worked at it. Sharon joined the foundation board and discovered she had a talent for fundraising and outreach. Richard slowly learned to ask about Nicholas's teaching instead of just tolerating it. Patricia started inviting Nicholas's colleagues to their social events, treating them like equals instead of curiosities. And Nicholas kept teaching chemistry at Roosevelt High School because that was who he was. Not a rich man who taught as a hobby, but a teacher who happened to have inherited wealth. The money paid for scholarships and programs and opportunities for students who needed them, but it didn't define him. 2 years later, Sharon brought up the prenup one evening after Grace was asleep. I want to void it, she said. Nicholas looked up from his grading. Why? Because it represents everything that was wrong with us. Because it's a reminder of how I failed to trust you, failed to value you, failed to be your partner. She paused. Because if we're going to be married, really married, we should share everything, the way it should have been from the beginning. Nicholas considered this. You realize that would give you access to my inheritance, to everything my grandfather left me? And it would give you access to my trust fund and my inheritance, Sharon countered. That's how marriage is supposed to work, isn't it? What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. Is this what you really want? Or is this guilt talking? Sharon met his eyes. It's what I really want. Nicholas, I spent 2 years being the wrong kind of partner because I was afraid of losing control, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of what it meant to truly share my life with someone. I don't want to be that person anymore. And that document in a safe deposit box somewhere, it's like a talisman of all my worst instincts. I want it gone. Nicholas set down his pen. If we void the prenup and things don't work out, you could walk away with half of everything I have, $50 million or more. And you could walk away with half of what I have, Sharon said. That's the risk we both take. That's what makes it a real partnership. He studied her face, looking for the woman he'd fallen in love with years ago. She was there now, he realized. Changed, scarred by experience, humbled by failure. But there, fighting her way back to the person she'd wanted to be. Okay, Nicholas said. Let's void the prenup. They signed new papers that spring, eliminating the protective barriers that had defined their marriage. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time, like jumping off a cliff with someone and trusting they'd hold on. Some people never understood Nicholas's choice. His teacher friends thought he was crazy to give Sharon access to his inheritance after how she'd treated him. James Morrison, his lawyer, cautioned him that he was taking an enormous financial risk. But Nicholas had learned something important over the past 4 years. The prenup had protected his money, but it had poisoned his marriage. And at some point, you had to decide what mattered: more security or trust, protection or partnership, keeping score or building something real. He chose partnership. And surprisingly, it worked. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Epilogue. 5 years after Nicholas's 35th birthday, the King Family Foundation had awarded scholarships to over 200 students. Nicholas had been promoted to head of Roosevelt High School's science department but refused a salary increase, instead directing the additional money to his classroom supplies budget. Sharon had left her corporate job and now ran the foundation full-time, using her marketing skills to expand its reach. She'd learned to value impact over income, purpose over prestige. Richard Ashford had sold his dealership chain and started a nonprofit providing car maintenance training to low-income communities. Patricia served on the foundation board and had become, surprisingly, one of Nicholas's closest allies in the work. And Grace King, now 5 years old, was equally comfortable in her grandfather's workshop and her father's chemistry lab, learning that success came in many forms and that the richest people weren't always the ones with the most money. One evening, as Nicholas put Grace to bed, she asked him a question. "Daddy, why do you still teach school? Mommy said you have lots of money, you could do anything." Nicholas smiled. "I teach because it matters. Because helping students understand chemistry, helping them believe in themselves, that's worth more than any amount of money I could have in the bank." "But you could be rich and not work," Grace pointed out with 5-year-old logic. "I am rich," Nicholas said. "I have you. I have your mom. I have students who trust me and colleagues who respect me and work that gives my life meaning. That's the only kind of wealth that really matters, Grace." She thought about this. "What about Grandpa's money?" "That's just a tool," Nicholas explained. "It helps us do good things for other people. But it's not who we are. It's just what we have." "Okay," Grace said, satisfied. "Then, Daddy, when I grow up, can I be a teacher like you?" Nicholas felt his throat tighten. "You can be anything you want, sweetheart. Teacher, doctor, scientist, artist. Whatever makes you happy. Whatever lets you help people. Whatever gives you purpose." "Good," Grace said. "Because Tommy's mom says teachers don't make very much money." "Tommy's mom is right," Nicholas said. "Teaching doesn't pay as well as lots of other jobs." "Then why do you do it?" "Because some things are more important than money," Nicholas said. Grace yawned and closed her eyes. "I think I understand, Daddy." Nicholas kissed her forehead and turned out the light. As he walked downstairs, he found Sharon in the living room, looking at old photos from their wedding. "Regrets?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. But I was looking at these pictures and thinking about who we were then. How young. How stupid I was about what mattered." "We both were," Nicholas said, sitting beside her. "No. You weren't. You knew all along. That's why you waited. That's why you let me show you who I was before you showed me who you were." She looked at him. "Thank you for being patient enough to let me become someone worth being married to." "You were always worth it," Nicholas said. "You just forgot for a while." They sat together in their living room, the home they'd chosen together, the life they'd built together, the family they'd created together, and Nicholas realized that his grandfather had been right about everything. Money revealed who people were, pressure and heat created reactions, and the strongest bonds were the ones that survived being tested. "I learned something important through all of this," Nicholas said. "The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well. It's letting people face the consequences of their own actions. It's becoming so secure in who you are that other people's opinions don't matter anymore." "Is that the lesson?" Sharon asked. "The thing you'd want people to take away from our story?" Nicholas thought about it. "The lesson is that we all have blind spots. We all judge people unfairly sometimes. But if we're lucky, life gives us a chance to learn better, to become better. And the measure of our character isn't in never making mistakes, it's in how we respond when we're forced to see our mistakes clearly." "That's very wise for a chemistry teacher," Sharon said with a smile. "Chemistry teachers are full of wisdom," Nicholas replied. "We understand reactions. We know that sometimes you have to break bonds before you can form new ones. We know that transformation is possible when conditions are right, and we know that the most valuable elements aren't always the ones that shine the brightest. Sharon leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you, Nicholas King. Thank you for not giving up on me. I love you too, he said. And you're welcome. Though technically, you made it easy with that prenup. Best decision you ever made. Ironically. She laughed. Don't remind me. But he did remind her. Sometimes, because some lessons were too important to forget, and because the story of how a chemistry teacher outsmarted a rich family with their own prenup was too good not to retell. It became their favorite story to share with Grace, as she grew up not as revenge porn, but as a lesson in humility, patience, and the dangers of judging people by their bank accounts. A reminder that wealth could blind you to what really mattered, but love, real, tested, hard-won love, could help you see clearly again. And that, Nicholas decided, was worth more than any inheritance his grandfather could have left him.